Hello again, listeners, and welcome back to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Today, I'll be talking about sales and sales coaching and why the art of selling is the lifeblood of the business in many ways. My guest is Mark Hayes. He's a sales coaching expert, podcast host himself, and an author of a book that is up for an award later this month in London. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about all kinds of topics around sales and leadership and where the two meet and the similarities, but also some interesting topics around introversion, the importance of hiring the right people, and Mark's various experiences as a sales coach. So I hope you will find it useful and interesting. This is Leading with Integrity, Leadership Talk, the podcast for first-time managers who are working in tech-driven businesses and teams and who want to be more effective, people-first leaders. Each week, you will learn the crucial strategies, mindsets, and practical tips that successful modern leaders follow to be engaging, ethical, and authentic managers who get the best from their teams. And we'll achieve all of this via weekly conversations with leaders, with leadership experts, entrepreneurs, and business owners, people who have already walked this path and have some amazing insights to share, with an added sprinkling of occasional solo episodes like this one and some group chats where we'll have multiple guests. My name is David Hatch and I will be your host. And leadership has always been a passion for me. After a career spent in a series of small businesses during 15 years in the aerospace industry, 5 or 6 of those at the end of that career were in a space startup in the UK. So trying to launch satellites into orbit, very cool stuff. And through all of that experience, I learned that the secret to successful management is in the ability to apply great leadership. And in turn, the secret to great leadership, it's all about your integrity, putting people before profits.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
I'm joined today by Mark Hayes from sunny Barcelona. So I'm not jealous of the weather that you have, honest.
No, it's terrible here. It's t-shirts and shorts and olives and beards. You wouldn't like it, no.
No, it sounds like I wouldn't. Well, thanks for being here today. It's great to meet you and looking forward to chatting. So I'm going to let you start us off by giving a bit of background about what you do, your career so far, what gets you out of bed in the morning, really.
Yeah, thank you, David. Where do I start? Well, what we do right now is work with primarily sales leadership teams, helping them to train their sales managers to be coaches. And I find that many organizations know they should be coaching. Many salespeople know they should be being coached, but they're not being coached. And it's a fundamental part of leading a team in any organization, specifically in sales. It's critical because unless we're actually helping people in what is extremely tough as a role, there is a lot more psychological pressure. People get stuck and often leave because they haven't got that central support piece, which is exactly what coaching provides. So I help them by walking them through a program to move from, you could say, zero to hero. That's not perhaps fair, but to learn how to coach and why coaching is a critical centerpiece of anyone's leadership skills, particularly in my world, when leading a sales team.
Okay, so you coach people into becoming coaches as well as better salespeople?
Well, I train them. So
right.
The brand is Sales Coacher. So we literally work primarily with tech companies and help them to understand what coaching is, where to apply it, whom to coach, when to coach, how to coach. And That is a 3-month program, but then having trained people, we then help them through coaching to become better coaches. So we coach the coach, if you will. But when people don't know what to do, it's sometimes because they haven't been shown how to do it and how to approach it. So the training piece is where you help people to understand what the skills and knowledge are that they need to have. And we use then coaching to embed that and sustain it.
It's interesting, though, I think, that you've chosen to focus on sales as a field to do that within, rather than leadership more widely. So is that because you've got a background in sales yourself, or it's something you've always been interested in, or a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. And I find that I'm fascinated because my bread and butter when I'm not training people how to coach are every single week deal reviews. So I'm working with someone who at the front line should be walked through a deal review by their manager, but they're not for some reason. And I will come in as a third party, and my colleagues do this as well. I have a small team, and we will take a deal, let's say in Salesforce, and we'll use something like MEDPIC or MEDIC or Winning by Design or whatever framework that someone wants to use. And we can find gaps and ask coaching questions to help that person to understand what they perhaps are missing. So we're not critical. That's key. People don't like being coached by people who are asking them to justify what they've done or not done. Instead, we're using coaching to make that person the hero and help them to unlock a series of steps and also help them to gain fresh perspective. What else does this tell me about how I'm approaching my pipeline or prospecting or any number of things? And so coaching helps people, it gives them a toolkit to be aware of what they need to do and for their reasons to close something that's important to them. So, for example, we'll use, as I said, Salesforce. We'll sit down together, find a deal where someone feels it's stuck, it's not advancing, the prospect is not responding, and we'll use coaching to help that person to understand what the next steps are that they choose. So I will facilitate that process, and they'll come up with a breakthrough. Now, often I will know what needs to be done, but if I tell them, I'm short-circuiting that creative process. And coaches believe that everyone who is being coached is a partner, in the sense that we're not talking down to them. We're helping them to talk to themselves, talk to us, be open, transparent, and honest. And that person then really appreciates that sounding board. And they come away from sessions with me thinking, yeah, that let's say 170,000 deal is now in a better place because I feel I know what needs to be done. And they'll come back to me and say, yeah, that worked. So it's a privilege, I think, to coach. And that's really what fires me up, gets me out of bed, as you said. It's that knowing that within 1 hour, I can sit down with a rep and help them to come away with a plan, not just a plan, but to feel good about that series of next steps, which in a way I've co-created, because coaches believe that coaching is collaborative, coactive, and co-creative. And it's a lot better than just directing people and telling them what to do, which doesn't always work, by the way.
Well, I'd have to agree with you there. It must be incredibly powerful, though, particularly in sales. I mean, when you said about not being critical, I mean, typically, certainly in sales teams that I've worked with, I've never worked in one, it's quite a high-pressure environment anyway, depending on the business. But then when things don't go the way that the business owners perhaps want them to, which can happen quite a bit in sales as well, there is that tendency, isn't there, to be critical, to place blame on, well, why didn't you close enough sales and that kind of thing. So it must be a really, I guess, a almost unique, but definitely a different way of approaching it. And so I really like the sound of it, I must say.
It is. And I think people who learn to become better coaches as leaders become better people. And I've said this to people before, on this program, we're going to go through now with my team. You're not just going to be a better salesperson or sales leader. I think you're actually going to be coming away with a skill set which you can apply to all areas of life. And anyone listening to your show, David, knows that we all like to feel better about ourselves. I think coaching helps you to do that, both as a leader and as someone who's being coached, because I'm helping you to unblock. And as I call it, get to understand, to uncover, to unlock. So you could apply this literally in a range of areas as a leader. You could apply this at the time that you're hiring people, onboarding people. You can use coaching in performance reviews. You can use this with succession planning. There's a whole range. It's actually a life skill which is transformative. And people have said to me, it doesn't just actually make me a better sales leader. I now feel like I'm a better person because I'm more interested. I'm more curious. I'm asking better questions. And when I'm on the receiving end of coaching, I think that helps me too. So coaches are open to being coached. They're coachable, able to coach, and are willing to be coached. And I think that is an amazing thing. When you've really been coached, you come away not just with next steps that you come up with in any situation, but you've come away with some clarity about how to be a better person to other people. And that's a lot to say, I know, but I feel this, and people have said that to me. It's really helped me to apply this to my marriage or to my, with my kids, using coaching more as opposed to directing, telling, almost criticizing, which sometimes is a problem because, to your point, people don't like to be told what to do or feel they have to justify why they do what they do. We need to help them to find their own path, and that's the power of coaching.
Taking that approach of almost like curiosity, where you're asking questions and subtly perhaps leading people down a path, I think it's much better from the perspective of the coachee or the employee or whatever they're called, because then feel like, exactly as you say, they're not being put on the spot. They're not going to get, or they're less likely to get defensive about the conversation. So, yeah, I mean, I think coaching is an incredibly important skill that any leader in any context needs to have. It's certainly one tool in the toolbox. It can depend upon the stage of the career or the stage of experience that the person you're dealing with has. I think it doesn't work in every situation.
Correct.
I don't know what your perspective on that is, but
it's true. I mean, I'm reminded of situational leadership. I had the privilege of interviewing Ken Blanchard, one of the creators of that model, way back in the 60s, 70s. Not the interview wasn't in the 60s and 70s, obviously, but his work is, and he's famous for something called SL2 or Situation Leadership 2. And what this reminds us is that, again, to your point, coaching is not always the only tool or the right tool for a situation. And the fact is, not everyone is coachable. Sometimes I can quickly identify that someone is just not responding to coaching. So you really have to say, am I better off using something like the skill will matrix and saying, where am I best as a leader going to apply my skills, my time, my resources to someone? Is that person coachable? Do they need more training, more information, more upskilling? Do they need perhaps mentoring, buddying up with people? Or sometimes they're just not the right person in the right place at the right time. And we can definitely wear the tread on our tires by trying to coach the uncoachable. And I had said that in my book, half jokingly. There's a famous prayer. I'm not sure if it's a prayer, but it's something like, give me the strength to coach the people I can, the courage to manage the people I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference, something like that. In other words, trying to coach everyone is not going to work. And sometimes you've got to triage your approach, David, as a leader, and say, what is the best approach for this person, given who they are, where they are, and what the task is coaching going to work? Or do they already have the information? So we have to recognize when coaching is going to pay dividends. And although I see myself as someone who leads with coaching, I would not tell anyone listening that coaching is the only thing or always the right thing. And you're right, David, it has to be something that we use judiciously, knowing that it's going to yield results. Because we can spend a lot of time coaching the squeaky wheel without any payback. And that's heartbreaking. So one of the things that we do is to help people to recognize who is coachable, who needs coaching, and how to coach that person in a given situation.
I think it's one of the more nuanced challenges that leaders face, isn't it? Is having that, I guess, being flexible, but also being able to read that context and apply the appropriate approach to any given situation. So yeah, it's very, very important. Okay, well, we've covered quite a few of the questions anyway, so I'm going to skip one, and we're going to go on to what happens to a sales team where the people in it are not being coached.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot. And I say tongue in cheek, but it's true. If you're not coaching people, they will probably gravitate towards someone in your company other than you or outside your company, away from you, who will coach them. And the reason is that COVID has, to a large extent, changed how the current generation of people entering the workforce see themselves and see employers. What they want, I see, in listening to people in interviews, is that they're quite clear, almost more confident than ever, than I was perhaps in my generation, about what they want to be and how quickly they want to get there. And so coaching is really an active development. People want to feel they're going to work with people who help them to grow, to evolve, and to acquire. And so we have to be really attractive to people and make them feel that they're not just going to work and put in the time and earn money, but also they're going to be able to acquire skills and to improve their skill set, which helps them on their career. And if we're not providing that, we're not giving people access to managers who coach their hires, grow them, develop them, they're going to leave. So the first reason or challenge is that organizations will lose key people. And if we're not developing people, we're going to lose people. Now, some people you might want to lose because they're not performing, they're not in the right place, it's just not right for them. We need to be aware and remind ourselves of the cost of talent acquisition. It is huge. In sales, it's enormous. If you think of the average account executive these days, their salary in the UK could be, depending on the company, upwards of 150,000. And the good AEs could attract more or demand more. And then you think of all the time that it takes to develop that person, to invest in that person, equipment, licenses, manager's time, colleagues' time. And then within 8 months, that person still hasn't generated return on investment. If that person leaves, what are the numbers? It's frightening. There's a huge cost to losing talent at any stage, but particularly when you've invested in that person. So I would say there's only one thing worse than all of that, only one thing worse than investing in people and watching them leave. It's not investing in them and watching them stay. Because then people move into a different gear and they become perhaps uncooperative or simply unproductive. And weekly conversations I have in the group accountability sessions with clients is they say things like, how do I get rid of this person? And which is brutal, but sometimes it's, this person's not really generating ROI. They're unmanageable. What do I do? Is coaching going to work for them? So the number one reason that we see coaching not work is that people aren't applying it correctly in the right ways at the right time. And if we do not develop people in some way, coaching is only one way, we're going to lose them, and that leads to churn. And in many organizations, that can become a flood, not just a tap flow.
Yeah, well, a lot to unpack there. I think the bit that stands out for me is talking about it in the context of development, isn't it? And yeah, we've all heard the CFO versus CEO cliche, let's call it. What if we don't train them and they stay? I mean, that's always been the biggest threat to me, and why development is so important. And do you think, I mean, given the wider economic context we're going through in a lot of places these days, do you think training and development is something that's under threat in terms of spending?
It is, David. And the reason is, it's been said to me many times before, because on my podcast, one of my podcasts, the Sales Coach podcast, I interview people in the sales enablement space. And classically speaking, when the scythe comes through or is driven through organizations in difficult times, it's often organizations which are seen as non-revenue generating, which come under fire. And HR, L&D, enablement, that's a classic target for a CFO saying, okay, who can we get rid of? Who can we lay off? Who can we transition into a waiting room? And it's usually those people.
I guess I sit on the fence with it a little bit, because on the one hand, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? If you're being really brutally honest about it, you know, if if the bottom line is struggling, you've got to go for the thing that is furthest away from generating the cash, haven't you? Because it becomes about survival in those situations. But at the same time, it is also incredibly short-sighted, because you might buy yourself 6 months, but in 2 years' time, what's going to be the state of your team?
Yeah, I would, of course, I'm biased. I'm going to argue that you've got to invest in people continuously.
I agree. Yeah.
And your most important strategic asset is your people. And often the bean counters, without sounding disparaging, will make a decision based upon the bottom line. But the bottom line is connected to the top line, and the top line of the people. They're the people that connect with your customers, interact with your customers. They're the people who marshal resources that they provide to customers. So numerically speaking, I'm sure there is a case to let go some people, but there often is an emotional impact on the team. And when that becomes toxic, you have to think of the implications to the business. I see a lot of people on LinkedIn talk about the importance of keeping those people through the hard times, because then they become stickable in the good times. And it's funny how this principle of reciprocity is true. If we get what we give what we get. And when people feel an emotional connection to you as an employer, to a leader, they actually cut you a lot of slack, don't they? You know, even when times are tough, they're going to put in the work. They want to stay. And one of my clients, a guy called James, has come back to his employer 3 times. Why? Not because of the money. He said he's sometimes aware that he could work in other companies, but he says sometimes the grass is actually browner on the other side. It's not green. We're taken in by the swag or the brand or the Glassdoor score or something like that. But we find that the people we work with are the people we feel really good about, and they feel good about us. So you have to think of the impact on your organization of losing people. And the way it was explained to me back in the day was that there are sometimes people who will not necessarily carry their weight, but they're invaluable in creating an atmosphere, a culture where people want to come and work, and they want to stay, and they want to grow. It's easy to say, well, I'm going to stop paying these people because I can't see, numerically speaking, the effect they're having or the profit they're bringing in. But sometimes there are people whose input's hard to quantify. It's non-numerical, but it's there. And those people are the people that actually attract other people to work for you. And while some managers have not been the best managers to me in terms of helping my career, I like them as friends. And I've liked working for them and liked helping them to help me. And that's a big thing. Coaches can get that from people, I think.
I do agree with you. I guess I was trying to empathize with the bean counters, as you call them.
Yeah, we have to.
I think the other thing that a lot of people miss as well is the reputational risk. I think if you get to that point, I mean, most people are going to realize that the business is struggling anyway. But if you then start laying off people for quite mercenary reasons, let's say, I mean, they're going to be quite disgruntled, aren't they? They're not going to go out and sing the praises of your business to everyone they talk to, are they? They're going to do the opposite. And very quickly that can catch up, especially with a small company.
It can. And if we both agree or subscribe to the idea that your people are your most important asset, strategic asset, then we need to do the very best we can to keep them. The cost of acquisition, talent acquisition these days is high. There are lots of layoffs in a range of industries right now. We're seeing that in the headlines. But like everything else, there are waves and breaks in waves, and the economy will come back. There are signs it is coming back strongly in some areas. And then we have that lag time to fill in the people or find the people that we let go of. And we saw that during COVID. Lots of organizations laid off people and then said, we've no pilots, we've no one, handling security or immigration. And what do we do? So it can be short-sighted to let go of people. There is a case for digging in and doing the very best that you can for people, in the belief that when things come back, and they often do come back, usually do come back, that you'll have built a stronger connection to those people, and that work will actually pay off.
I agree. I mean, hospitality sector was the other big example with COVID, wasn't it? And I think what they're struggling with now is so many people left that industry because of what happened and the way they were dealt with, and now don't want to come back because it's too much of a risk, or they found a job in another industry and all of that. And so they're having a staff shortage, aren't they? And yeah, I mean, it's a pretty stark example, isn't it, of that short-term versus long-term view. And I agree with you. I think with leadership, now is the time when things are difficult that you should be leaning into that stuff and not using it as a reason to pull back and stop spending on training, or stop coaching people, or stop paying people even. And I think, as you say, you're going to be much better off in the long run.
Yeah, I think so. But that message is not getting through to some people, unfortunately.
No, but I kind of think those people are the ones who would be like this anyway. And they're just maybe using this situation as an excuse or a rationale, I don't know, justification, if you like.
Yeah, and it seeps into our culture as well. I was watching an episode, the latest one of Succession last night, one of my favorite series. And there's this scene where Greg, who is, well, I'll not use words to describe him, but he's an interesting character. And he's laying off people in the most mechanical, unemotional fashion possible. And it comes across as just something brutal and emotionally unintelligent. And people don't forget that, how you treat people on the way out's going to come back at you in some form. People talk about their experience on Glassdoor as an example, and you don't get the reputation of sticking with your people. So we have to think of leadership lessons here. If I treat people in a particular way, what does that do for my leadership brand? And that's a strong piece of advice given to me, is you're not just managing people, you're creating a brand for yourself, which other people talk about when you're not there. What's it like to be managed by that guy, led by that guy? Does he listen to you? Does he interest himself or herself in your world and your ideas? Are they growing you? Or are they just treating you some kind of digit, some kind of thing on a spreadsheet? And I think, culturally speaking, many people listening will remember Up in the Air with George Clooney. And you have this person who is flying around America, trying to acquire air miles. That's his interest, but actually his job is to come into organizations and as quickly and mechanically as possible remove people. Why are leaders delegating that dirty work to other people? I think it's a sign of courage when you can say to someone, look, I'm having concerns. I'd like to work with you to come up with some kind of plan to resolve this, or I value your contribution and in these areas, and I can use my notes to think of things that person's achieved or contributed to. And I've got concerns for these reasons, and I'd like to work with you to come up with a plan to address these, and so that we can blank. And that bridging statement, so that we can blank, is collaborative. It makes you sound like you're interested in saving someone, not just dumping on someone. So your leadership brand is critical, and whether coaching is part of that's up to you. But when people think of what it's like to be led by you, and I'm reminded of that great book by Goffey and Jones, Why Should Anyone Be Led by You? It's key to reflect upon not just your role as a manager, but your role as a shepherd of people, a leader of people. People want to be led by you. They want to be working on your team. They come to you because they know that they'll be empowered. They'll be given rope to try things. They'll not be criticized if things don't work. And that's so important these days. People, think of what Google does. Google encourages people to try things, to go and try something in a project sense and screw up, get back up and try again. And one of my favorite quotes is from a fellow Irishman, Samuel Beckett. And he says, ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. I think something that many people like about their leaders is that they feel it's okay to take risks and to learn from those things. And when I can do that, I feel safe, which links back to this concept of psychological safety. And I'm also I'll feel better about myself. And if you can help me to feel better about myself, I'll do a lot for you.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that whole concept of psychological safety, and when we talk about it in the context of innovation as well, so a lot of tech businesses get this quite badly wrong, and a lot of them get it really, really right. And it's that ability, that freedom, that lack of blame to go out and try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't, okay, what did we learn? Operative word being we. And if it does, great. Why did it work? Let's try and do that again. And I think that's the essence of innovation, isn't it? And leaders who aren't able to do that, who fall into the blame game, the recriminations, I think ultimately they're gonna fail at innovation. They're going to stifle creativity, and the performance of the people they're leading will massively suffer. So, yeah, I agree with everything you've just said.
Good.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about sales then, because I know that is your specialism, and I know you love talking about it. So, as an entrepreneur, maybe a new business owner, what advice could you offer them for how they can better qualify their sales opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great point. Qualification is fundamental. Let me start by saying this. First of all, why is sales important? Sales is important because it's the lifeblood of your organization. Any organization, any business, new or existing, needs people who bring in revenue streams. You agree? Okay, we do. We both agree. Great. And
yeah,
the funny thing is that if you go and find a university with a program on sales, you'll be looking a long time. There are programs in marketing, programs in entrepreneurship, programs on business, and all kinds of other subcategories, but I've yet to find a 4-year program or a 2-year program purely on sales. You could perhaps count them in one hand. Why is that? Strange. We need people to really focus on sales and selling. It seems to be a dirty word. I'm reminded of that book, To Sell is Human, by Dan Pink, who talked about the etymology of sales, the history of sales, and often society's perception of salespeople. If we want to generate income, keep the doors open, keep the wolf from that door, we need to have sales. And therefore, if you're starting a company or even in the process of growing a company, you need people who can do that exceptionally well. And qualification is one of the tools. And when an organization sees that there is an actual defined sales process in place, there's an actual discipline where key people in the team are making it their top priority to bring in revenue, to qualify opportunities and to close them, that's a good sign. To a venture capitalist, for example, you guys don't just have great software. You're not just great guys. You haven't just got beanbags and nice rooms and all that tech bro stuff, but you're serious about generating income. You have a plan to generate revenue streams consistently, and that's projected forward. You have some kind of forecasting. A fundamental part of this, David, is the ability to say, what does good look like? Okay. So when we, let's say, conduct something like white space analysis, we look at a territory, we look at a series of accounts, we say, okay, who's out there? What are they doing? Where are the opportunities? Who are the key decision makers? How do we approach these people? What does that account plan look like? What are the stages of that process? How do they buy from people like us? You realize there's a lot to unpack here. At the core, qualification helps you to say, what do we know good looks like? Who's the ideal client profile, ICP? And if we were to engage with that person, ask them key questions, uncover opportunities, quantify, qualify that opportunity, we will be in a stronger place. We can then say with confidence that working on this opportunity is going to yield dividends. And I regularly see people putting up a great product, but not having any plan to generate ROI. They fall in love with the product, not the problem, not the pain point. And what qualification does is, as part of selling, it focuses the mind on really being clear about who is right for you. Why would they pay you to solve their problem? What is that problem? What's the consequence of not solving that problem? How long has that problem existed? So when you are really clear on what your sales team are doing as an owner of a company or a leader of a company, and you realize the importance of sales, and you ensure that those people are upskilled and coached and developed and properly compensated, you're a long way down the path to ensuring that your doors stay open. And when I think of qualification, there are different frameworks out there. A common one your listeners might have heard of before is called BANT. So we encourage people to think of the budget a prospect has, the authority of that person to make a buying decision, the need, which is critical, no need, no lead. What is the exact need that person has? Can we solve that need? Maybe not. Okay. And the time frame within which we can solve that. Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? And that links to what's called the sales cycle. Is this something we can close within X amount of time? That's one framework. One I use a lot with sales teams in software companies, which is really my niche, is something called MEDIC or MEDPIC. It's been around a long time. It's not mine. And 3 guys back in the 90s came up with this, Dick Dunkel, Jack Napoli, and John McMahon. I've spoken to John, I've interviewed him. And they developed this framework to ensure that you have almost a playbook how to follow your qualification. So first of all, implicated pain or identify pain. Is this person's or company's problem something we can solve? Can we quantify that with metrics, M? And who's the person on the inside of that company whom we can work with to validate this pain and ensure that it's something they can help us to close? I'm being very simple here, so this is simplistic, okay? So the first 3 metrics, identified pain and champion, remind anyone listening that if your salespeople are focusing on clarifying what the pain is, who feels that pain, and quantifying that pain, you're a long way down the path to ensuring that you're going to sell something to someone because they can recognize there's value in talking to you. After that, further with that acronym MEDPIC or MEDIC, MEDDIC or PICC, there are different flavors of this. We look at things like decision criteria. What is someone looking for from a vendor or solution provider like you? What are the parts of that person's or company's decision-making process? And then things like who is the champion and how will you work with people like legal, procurement, etc. So to anyone listening, if this is a blizzard of information, there's a lot to unpack. But I'm, again, an evangelist for sales capability. Understandably, that's what I do. And I think anyone who's even agnostic about selling, listening to this, will realize that without salespeople or selling as a function at the decision-making table, no matter how good your product is, no matter how good your people are, you will not stay open, you will not sell, and therefore you will not exist.
Yeah, I must say I identify with a lot of the points you've made there. It is interesting, isn't it, the reputation of salespeople as a category. And I wonder if some of the less favourable popular TV programmes perhaps are the culprit there. But I think a lot of people, you say salesperson and used car salesman pops into your head, or or in the UK, it's the conservatories and double glazing, isn't it, and that sort of thing. And I think that's horribly unfair. Like it's a generalisation based on a very small number of, I won't say fraudsters, but let's call them bad actors. And yet they seem to now be associated with an entire category. And actually, I've met and worked with some really great salespeople. I've been sold to by some great salespeople, and the ones who I think really get it right are the ones where they see it more as building a relationship, and they don't just, as soon as you've kind of signed the contract and paid, you never hear from them again. They check in with you over the coming however long the delivery period is, and they keep that relationship going. And I think that's what makes sales really powerful as a tool for any business. And of course, I agree with you. It is the lifeblood. I think I would say equal, or at least parity or approaching equal with the people delivering, because I think maybe that's my background and maybe I'm a bit biased there, but I think, you can sell as much as you like. If no one delivers it, no one gets paid either. So
yeah, it's true. How do you actually prioritize this? It's like saying which is more important, the left wheel of the car or the right hand side?
Quite so. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Indeed. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, yes, that's some really useful advice there on qualification. I think that's really, really good. I'm certainly going to start applying some more of that myself because I'm a terrible salesperson. So it's really good advice for me as well. Thank you.
I think that what you've said is quite true, and it's unfortunately true, is that sales often in people's minds conjures up this image of someone dumping something, twisting your arm, manipulating you. There is an element of psychology in selling, and there are people who give it a bad name. Let's be honest. Think of Glenn Ross, that wonderful film. And you see this almost intimidation going on, people using sales to strong arm someone. But that's not what selling really is. 95% of the people I work with, actually, I think, are leaning towards introversion. They're not this suit and tie, gold watch, in your face, aggressive, pump and dump kind of person. They're consultative. At least the successful ones are, because they're focused on the person whom they're talking to. They're building that relationship, as you said, David. They're engaged, knowing that short-termism will not yield results. Some sales cycles are quite long. Unless you're actually helpful, service-oriented, you will not earn. And I say this, thinking of the impact of this phrase, you have to serve before you deserve. You have to serve people and connect with people, understand people's motivations, and help them to solve their problems. That is selling. It's not just, hey, do you want to buy this? That's not selling. That's positioning, perhaps, and it's aggressive. And the more complex the deals, the more complex the products you're selling, the more relationships are important, because you might have to work with someone in procurement and in information security, InfoSec, and in operations and in leadership, perhaps in C-suite level. And therefore, your ability to connect with people, consult, and help people comes to the fore. Transactional selling, David, is what we all think of. It's this, hey, do you want to buy this? It's that thing in the shop, this pressure to whip out the card. But the longer stuff and the complex stuff, that needs relationship building. And this is, again, where coaching helps, because you can use coaching skills to show curiosity, ask great questions. And when you can get someone to open up and they tell you what they're struggling with and why and the impact and how long it's been going on, you can ask a better question and then a better question. And that person then is effectively telling you what they need you to sell them. And that's simplistic, I know, but introversion is more common in sales than we think. I think some of the people that really impress me, they're like quite deadly ninjas, because they're able to use just this listening and asking and curiosity to really build a runway to sales. So yeah, I'm not a fan of this awful depiction of salespeople as being these sharks that just want to, suck your blood. It's not true. Not true.
That's really interesting about introverts, actually. And I think about it, you're absolutely right, but that would never have been the first thought that popped into my head. That's really interesting.
It is. It is funny, because culturally you'll think, well, you're in sales, really? I thought you were shy, or I didn't think you were a salesperson. And I took some psychometric tests back in my mid-20s, and I went to a company in London, and I asked them about advice for careers. And it just shows the bias that some organizations have, or some people have. They have this fixed view in their heads that salespeople are a particular genre, they have a particular look and feel or a sound. And it's that person in your school, in class, who was the fast talker, or the constant talker, or the ultra confident, or so it seems, that person would end up in sales, where talking is what's selling. But selling is not necessarily regurgitating facts. In fact, it isn't. It's about connecting relationships, as you mentioned, David. It's about helping someone to open up and reveal where they are, what they're trying to do, what they've not done yet, what they have done hasn't worked. And I think introverts excel at that. And I'm getting better at recognizing introversion in myself and other people. And I'm often amazed how organizations feel we need to hire aggressive people to be in selling. We need to have that person on the line who's going to, crush it and close it. And we're going to all this kind of tech bro talk. And yet some of the most productive salespeople are just intensely curious, observant, data-driven, logical, thinking through this as an approach that is not just, hey, let's do this, but they're thinking of a strategy. And there's a great book, I must think of her name again, but there's a book on introversion by, I'll look it up while I'm talking to you actually, but it's about the quiet power of introverts. And it's extraordinary the number of people who hire salespeople in the mistaken belief that the people who meet that public perception are your salespeople. And it's a problem because we're attracting the wrong people into sales. What happens? We get this image of a person who is your fast talker, your dogged, which is important, person who comes across as, just a loudmouth. And it's not true. It's not accurate at all. And I had an interview with someone, Raki Voria, who was responsible. She was at VP level if I cast my mind back, at IBM about 3 years ago. And she talked about the problem many organizations have in attracting women into sales. Because there is this perception that salespeople are overwhelmingly men, increasingly not true. And also, we're attracting a profile of people who fit this kind of macho image of selling, when actually some of the most amazing salespeople I've come across are not male. Perhaps they're not straight male, or they are female, or they are introvert. So we have to change how we perceive sales and how we hire salespeople. If we're thinking that the people we've got to be aggressive or, almost maniacal talkers, that's not right. And we're doing a disservice to sales, and we're attracting the wrong people into sales, which I think is a bigger problem. Not enough females, not enough minority candidates, not enough people who lead with curiosity as opposed to leading with trying to convince people, conviction.
Absolutely. And so many parallels there just with leadership as well. There's not enough minority candidates or women in leadership positions. There's this perception that extroverts make great leaders because they're more outgoing and they talk a lot and all of the same things, when actually, in my experience, the best leaders are usually introverts because they're more able to listen and empathize and take in what they're being told and act on it, as opposed to feeling like they're the ones who just have to be, jabbering all the time, as I call it.
Bit like me.
Well, we all do it sometimes, don't we? But I think, it's funny, and it's exactly the same problem. I think we end up attracting the wrong people into leadership roles or promoting the wrong people within organizations because people are looking for the wrong skills when they're hiring those roles.
Yes, it is. And then how do you promote someone who is the wrong person? Well, it's difficult. If you've been attracting the wrong people into sales, then when you go look for managers, you'll make an even bigger mistake. Yeah.
Well, your candidate pool is already tainted, as it were, isn't it? So, interesting one. What is the biggest leadership lesson you've learned in your career so far?
It's hiring the best damn people you can hire and can afford, and investing in them emotionally. That's it. I began as an arrogant little puppy thinking that I'm now the boss when I was leading a team for the first time, literally, and I thought everything must come through me. I'm the decision maker in all things, and I effectively became the center of the universe. And I would look almost for people that I could, I wouldn't say dominate, but I could feel good about myself because I'm now the boss. And I see this a lot, and I recognize that, and it's horrifying when you realize that this is how some people lead. The biggest lesson for me is that you've got to hire the best people you can, trust them, develop them, and build the strongest connection you can with them emotionally. People are extremely complex organisms. Whatever about ChatGPT, still the most complex biocomputer or computer of any kind is arguably the human brain. But it's driven often by emotion, not just logic. We'd like to think of ourselves as logical people. Often it is said we make emotional decisions and back it up with logic or justify it with logic. So I think the biggest lesson I've learned is just that, David. It's trying to find the best people I can afford, and I will not always make an economic decision. And then trusting them, giving them the feeling that I trust them, and letting them get on with the work. And when I have those people, I sleep better. I know that person is doing their best, not just because they've got the skill set, but the heart set and the soul set, if you will. They are able to and want to get something done, and they'll just do things that will make me feel amazed and really feel confident I've hired the right person. They're thinking out of the box. They're surprising me. And I'm reminded of that expression, I think it was from Steve Jobs, who said, we don't hire people so we can tell them what to do. We hire people so they can tell us what to do. So that's been my driving lesson in recent times, is to find the best people you could possibly do and treat them well and let them amaze you.
I can only applaud that, I must say. I've never understood the leadership mindset of people who hire expert specialist people who've got like 20 years experience and multiple PhDs in their field, and then insist on telling them what to do and not listening to their expertise. What is the point of that? I've never got it. It's just a waste of money.
It's ego, isn't it? It's that, ego state.
Yeah, I guess so. But how much money are you wasting on that person that you're paying for their expertise and you're not using? Doesn't compute.
It's some kind of paradigm, again, which goes back to maybe, I'm thinking of the work of Eric Byrne and games people play. It's sometimes we have leaders who become mini dictators. And that was me when I first began. I had this, I've got this power trip. I'm now a manager. I'm going to tell people what to do and show them who's boss and all that kind of thing. It's the other way around. It's hire great people, challenge them, motivate them, get out of their way. Out of their way. You are the shepherd of people. You're not the sheep. Perhaps a bad analogy, but they have a job to do. You're there to facilitate their ability. And that's what your leadership role is to do, is to help people to be the best version of themselves, hire the best people, treat them, build connections with them, trust them, get out of their way.
Create the environment for them to succeed. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so who is the best leader that you've ever worked with or worked for?
I think a former, he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He passed away from cancer. One of my bosses about 4 or 5 years ago. But I was amazed how light touch this guy was, a guy called Brian. I'll not give his last name, but he founded a company in Northern Ireland, a tech company working in the financial services industry. So people, if they know who that is, then great. But this guy, Brian, was kind is the first word that comes to mind. I met him 2 years after I left the company, and he knew my name. I mean, that was amazing. Not everyone does that. And he seemed to be someone who prioritized the relationships, knowing that if he hired the right people and created conditions for them to feel good about what they do and who they are, amazing things happen. Loyalty is hard to come across these days. We live in an age when people are serially loyal. We're all driven by our self-interest, but sometimes if we can leverage people's loyalty, it goes a long way. And Brian created loyalty, really did. People stayed with him for years and for years. And you could see that. He would just come by your desk and know what you were doing, maybe outside of work, and he knew something about you that maybe other people had forgotten, even your managers had forgotten. And that was really inspirational to me. I thought, how can I be like him? How can I do something like that? And you got to get your nose out of things sometimes and just stand right back and look at the wider picture. People don't work for you for your reasons. They work for their reasons. What are those reasons? How can you help people connect with those reasons? And that's what Brian did. He built a company around relationships and having great people in the company who liked being around other people. And that's hard to do. We live in an age when people are increasingly remote, and people have said to me, I've never worked in the same room as the people I'm working with. Isn't that funny? They're there, but I've never met them. And many organizations, people listening to this will know we've onboarded people during COVID. We've never actually had them in the same team as their colleagues. So a long answer to a short question is, Brian managed to create people who wanted to come to this small town to work, not London, not LA, not New York or San Francisco, and were happy to do so. There was no, hatha yoga or any studios in the neighborhood, no great perhaps coffee shops, without denigrating the town in question. But people worked there because they believed in him and he believed in them. And I think that's a two-way street.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about trust earlier, and I think it's the same with loyalty, isn't it? If you want to build it, if you want people to display it towards you as a leader, then you've got to reciprocate. You've got to demonstrate that you trust them, that you're loyal to them, and that you're interested in what they're interested in, and so on. All those nice things you've just spoken about. So yeah, sounds like a great one. We've only got a few minutes left, so I'm going to skip to our last question.
Leadership heroes.
I skipped this one because it's the one that I have to ask every guest. Everyone gets this one. It's called Leadership Heroes. And you might actually just pick the same person you've just spoken about, but we'll find out. So if you had to pick a person, alive or dead, past or present, real or fictitious, if you feel like it, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership, who would that person be and why?
Yeah, again, it's Brian. He built a company, and it sounds like a cliche, but from his parents' back bedroom, his mother's back bedroom to be specific, back in 1996, I think, and has grown it to a company where, although he's no longer with us, he grew it to, I think, nearly 2,000 people. And it's a serious amount of money. He had it listed on the stock exchange. I think it was the AIM originally, if I've got that term correct. And I'm sure he screwed up. We all screw up, but he did such a good job in building that team of people from an unlikely location, and actually transformed the lives of many, many people who may not have had a crack at the whip because of where they were from or the stage they were at, and not just made many millionaires, but many people who I think have gone on to bigger, better things. So it's been said to me before that it's not about the people you lose as much as the people you help grow. And not everyone will stay with you forever as a leader, because that's life. People will come, they'll be with you for a short time. The age of working in the same company forever is gone. That's definitely gone. People now will move on, whether you invest in them or not. So recognizing that people are with you for a short while, doing your best for them, with them, to them, in the time that they're with you, that someone is like Brian to me, because he set so many people up for success. They were going to move on anyway, but they might have come back, or they might have sent people his way who joined his company. Who knows? But he was talked highly of, even when people no longer work for him. And I think that's a hell of an epitaph for him. R.I.P. Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's ticking all the boxes of everything we've been talking about today, isn't it? By the sounds of it. So yeah, what a great guy, and lucky to have worked with him as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. A privilege.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Mark, so much for your time and for sharing all of that with us today. Last thing, I always give everyone an opportunity at the end, if the listeners would like to learn more about you and what you do, if you'd like to point towards a website or your podcast, or perhaps a book, or all of the above, if you like.
All of the above, briefly, yeah. So first of all, my book is called Sales Coaching Essentials. It's helping people to get to grips with the very basic fundamentals of coaching. I'm fortunate in the sense that it's been shortlisted for the UK Business Book Awards. And people like Matt Dixon, who wrote one of the best-selling books of all time, The Challenger Sale, gave it a great review. He's actually inside the book. My podcast is called The Sales Coach Podcast, a really corny picture of me in a blue shirt, smiling on the podcast logo. And finally, you can check out Sales Coacher, which is SalesCoachr.com. No E between coach and R. So coach with an R at the end, salescoacher.com. And thank you, David, for letting me talk on your show today. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Well, thanks for being such a great guest. And yeah, I'll put the web address for that in the episode description as well, so people can find it easily. And yeah, it's been great. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, David.
Thanks again, Mark, for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day in that sunny weather that I'm still definitely not jealous of. Listeners, if you would like to learn more about Mark, and perhaps you're looking for some sales coaching, or you'd like to listen to his podcast or get a copy of his book, I've put the website details in the episode description so you can find that easily and click on that. If you'd like some help with leadership, if you are struggling with your confidence as a leader, you're struggling to get the most out of the people that you work with, or you're facing issues with staff engagement, retention, and so on, then Leading with Integrity can help you with that. Again, there's a web address in the episode description. My first recommendation would be my newest program, which is the Integrity Leaders Group Membership. It's a great place to start. It's relatively low cost and low commitment. It's a monthly rolling membership, so you can dip in and dip out whenever you need to, and hopefully you'll get some great value from it. You'll certainly be able to access a lot more materials than the podcast. You'll be able to access me personally. You'll be able to join our monthly Leadership in Focus sessions. We'll talk about a different topic each month. There's also a separate leadership Q&A session and the opportunity to ask anonymous questions if you prefer to go that route. So there's a lot of value bundled up in that membership, and it is really built to help new leaders, struggling managers, get more from their experience at work. Click the link for that in the episode description. It's www.leadernotaboss.com, and that's all one word. And I hope to see you there. Look forward to helping you. Thanks again for listening today. Please do feel free to leave us a review wherever it is that you're listening, and I hope that you will join us again next week. Take care, everyone, and remember, be a leader, not a boss.